As a pilot, you always take off with a flight plan. You always have your route, your weather, you calculate your fuel, your V-speeds, because in aviation you need structure for everything. But learning English as a pilot can be confusing and chaotic at times, especially if you're doing it on your own. And it doesn't even matter if you are in flight school or studying for ICAO or want to become a pilot in the future. You should always have a plan. Today we're breaking down exactly what Aviation English is and how to study it, so you can walk away with a real and actionable plan for your studies. Let's get started. You know, I was talking to some pilots the other day, and somehow we started talking about Aviation English. And when I asked them what Aviation English is, they had a really hard time answering this question for me. Those guys were real pilots, by the way, so they're flying out there right now and they're fluent in English. This whole conversation took place in English, yet they couldn't really answer this question. Obviously, those guys are not the problem, they are professionals, but there seems to be a slight confusion in what we mean when we say Aviation English. So let's try to figure it out first. Usually when we say Aviation English, we tend to think about radio communication. But if you watched our previous video, you remember that we actually said that Aviation English is very multi-dimensional. Besides radio telephony, we have ground communications during international operations, working with multinational crews. On top of that, you've got all kinds of manuals and checklists. And if you are not a pilot yet, there is a great chance that the education in the flight school that you will be going to will also be in English. So ideally, we want a plan that covers all of this and not just radio calls. Let me ask you something. Have you ever opened the first page of a language textbook? You would usually find the content page, right? With all the units. And if it's a good course book, for each unit you will find 3 descriptions. First one is vocabulary, second one is grammar, and the third one is the 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading, writing. These are basically the components of any language. So let's try to use them for Aviation English as well. So our first component is vocabulary, you know, all the words. And we can say that this is basically what defines Aviation English. Because if you think about other Englishes, take business English or academic English. What makes business English or academic English is for a great part the vocabulary, the words that you are using. And obviously the words that you are using during your business conference would be very different from the words you are using to write your thesis, and those would be very different from the words you are using in the cockpit or the words that you see while reading through your aircraft manuals. And when we are trying to learn vocabulary, we should try to avoid all the randomness. And first you need to understand where you are, because obviously it wouldn't be such a great idea to try to study a manual of Boeing 737 if you don't know what a vertical speed is. So right now on your screen you can actually see different Aviation English vocabulary topics, and they are all divided by 3 levels: beginner, intermediate, and advanced. And you can actually use this list to improve your Aviation English vocabulary. You can take the topic that you need or want to improve and find resources on this particular topic. But we will talk more about this later. Our second language component is grammar. And when we think about Aviation English, it is English at the end of the day. So of course we are using English grammar. However, personally, I think that there is a specific type of grammar related to Aviation English, and that grammar is standard phraseology. Now, while standard phraseology is more of a combination of both vocabulary and grammar, let's focus on the grammar part of standard phraseology. As you know, in Aviation English, when we speak on radio, we don't really use full sentences like we use in our normal speech. What we want to do is to make sure that our communication stays as concise and as to the point as possible. And of course, to avoid ambiguities, misunderstandings, miscommunications. And the way to achieve that is to use standard phraseology. And so here are our main grammar topics. clearance and taxi, takeoff and departure, readback, climb, cruise and descent, approach and landing, emergency communications. Now, while we're talking about phraseology, it might be worth mentioning that sometimes standard phraseology is not enough, which is when pilots and ATC sometimes switch to what we call as plain language, which is basically your general English phrasing. So you are no longer talking with keywords, but you are using full sentences, just like in your normal communication. Our third language component is our 4 skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We often tend to think that pilots only need listening and speaking. Even ICAO only tests those 2 skills. However, as we said in the beginning of the video, Aviation English is not only about talking on the radio. It goes much beyond that. You as a pilot need reading and even writing sometimes. Think about your manuals or flight plans or NOTAMs, for example. So as a future pilot, don't just focus on your speaking and listening skills. Also try to develop your other 2 skills as well. Now guys, before I give you the final study plan, we need to understand something really important. No matter how hard you are trying or how hard you are studying, you cannot become 100% fluent in aviation English on your own. The only real way to become fluent in aviation English is to come to the real cockpit. Think of it this way. You are trying to learn a new language, let's say French. And so the best way to learn French would be to move to France, right? Because you would constantly be surrounded by native speakers. You will be forced to speak with the native speakers, so you always hear that language, you always use that language, you always feel that pressure, you know? This is what we call the immersion. So for a pilot, the country they should move to become truly fluent would be the cockpit. You can study vocabulary, you can listen to live ATC, you can record yourself. Those things would definitely help you. But you know, that last 10%, that fluency, that confidence, this ability to react quickly on the spot, it would only come to you once you start flying. At the end of the day, no one was born to speak aviation English. It is a completely artificial language. Even English native speakers have to learn this stuff. Really, I just want you to think about where else outside of aviation would you ever use words like aileron or VOR, very high frequency omnidirectional range, right? This is all very, very specific, and each and every one of us have to learn this stuff. So your actual goal should be to build a foundation strong enough so that when you get into that cockpit, you are safe, you are confident, and you are ready to learn the rest. And finally, we came to the study plan. So the first step actually should be to make sure that your general English is already good enough. I would say that to be comfortable with aviation English, you should be at least B2 level of general English. And this is actually not just my opinion, ICAO also thinks like that. Because aviation English should be something that you put on top of your general English. After you feel confident in your general English, there are 4 areas that I would like you to focus on. Ideally, you should try to work on all 4 of them at the same time. So the first one is learning vocabulary and phraseology. Do not memorize random vocabulary lists. Instead, I want you to learn aviation in English. You can use ground school videos in English. You can watch some aviation YouTube channels. Mentor Pilot would be a great example of that. So every week you choose one aviation topic, can be weather, can be navigation, and explore it only in English. Second area is of course radiotelephony. Phraseology is a really structured language, so you need some time to get used to it. So regularly listen to live ATC recordings. Repeat the transmissions out loud. If you are watching it on YouTube, for example, you can pause and reply as if you are a pilot. You don't need to spend hours every day on this. Just make sure you do it regularly. The third area is reading. As we said before, aviation English is not only about radio. So just make sure that you are adding some light but regular reading to your studying as well. It can be NOTAMs. If you feel confident enough, it could be some parts of accident reports. And reading, by the way, really helps you with vocabulary, which is why maybe it can be worth reading on the topics that you are trying to learn in terms of vocabulary. And the last area is something that will help you build that fluency. And by the way, will help you during your ICAO exam as well. And that thing is regular speaking on aviation related topics. So at least once a week, do one of the following. Explain how a flight works from start to finish. Describe an abnormal situation and what you would do. Summarize an accident or technical video in your own words. And also record yourself if it's possible, so that you can listen back to it later on. And doing this regularly will really help you build that fluency and that confidence. But what do you think, guys? What is the hardest part about learning aviation English for you? Please let me know in the comments. My name is Maxim, I'm an aviation English teacher and a future pilot. This channel is all about helping pilots feeling confident about their English. And it doesn't really matter if you already are a pilot or just want to become one, you will find a lot of useful information here. So if you are interested, don't forget to subscribe and like this video as well. See you next time. Bye bye.